Welcome to the Coach Doctor podcast, a podcast where we discuss aspects of sports coaching from grassroots to grandstands. I'm your host, James Barkell, and on this podcast, we hear from academics who research coaching. We talk to coaches on the front line from development levels through to professional coaches, and we discuss other elements of successful sporting programs with experts and practitioners from a range of sports science fields, motivational psychology, strength and conditioning, and many other elements required for successful performance. If you'd like to know more about what we do at the Coach Doctor, you can visit our website, thecoachdoctor.com.au, and learn more about our services, or follow me on Instagram at thecoachdr or Twitter at James_Barkell for more regular information. On today's episode, I talk with Amy Shepherd. Amy is the current head coach and football development officer at the Sydney University Soccer Football Club. She's originally from Cambridgeshire, England, and has experience coaching with Norwich City in the regional development program, Watford FC Women's, as well as coaching in New Jersey in the USA. She's now making her mark in Australia, working across youth and senior women's football. Amy, welcome to the show.
Welcome, James. Thanks for having me.
First of all, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, what's your story, and how did you end up in Australia?
Yeah, so obviously, as you've mentioned there, it's a nice intro, by the way. As you mentioned, so originally from England, so sort of that's where I guess, grew up loving the game. A lot of my investment in football came from there, and my passion for the game came from there. Played just sort of like at a local level, but whilst playing was very much like a leader, took on a lot of leadership roles, was captain of my team, and then soon became a coach in the younger sides, before then sort of becoming a coach in the senior space. While studying at Sydney, Brighton University, I got a placement. So that was my first sort of like full-time role in a football club. So I got a placement year at Cambridge United Football Club. So sort of like a semi-professional men's league back home. Was working there for about a 6-month period, and then I got sort of a full-time job there afterwards. After graduating university, went into a sport development role. So that's what I did. I did sports development at university. So I went into a sport development role. So I knew I wanted to be in sport in some capacity, but still had coaching as my sort of forefront, and did a lot of coaching jobs. Then I got involved with Watford, started doing a lot of coaching in my local space, especially with the female game, and sort of went from there. And it wasn't until I got an opportunity arose that came up to coach full-time in America. So I took that, and that's when I moved to New Jersey. And that was sort of my first insight of actually coaching full-time, being involved full-time in football. Working sort of 7 days a week across multiple different age groups. And then from there, came to Australia in 2016 and have been stuck here ever since. So,
And what brought you to Australia?
Originally just traveling. So I just wanted to do a bit of traveling after being in America for sort of 3 years and coaching 7 days a week. It was very time consuming. I realised I hadn't really had much of a balance. So I saved up and decided that I wanted to travel for a bit. So travelled, and then Australia was the final destination, was meant to travel around Australia, but came to Sydney, met John Curran on day one of arrival, and then pretty much have been stuck here ever since. Obviously had some visa issues, so I went home for 2 years, and that's when I was working at Norwich and Watford, both of them together, which was a great learning experience of 2 years, and then got an opportunity to be sponsored and came back in January 2020. So
Okay, great. So when you met John, was that a planned meeting or was that just coincidental?
So originally, after America, I went back home just before then traveling, and I just emailed. I knew that Australia was going to be the final destination. So I emailed sort of several companies, just like coaching jobs in Sydney. John's email came up, emailed him, and then arranged a call with him. So I actually had a phone call with him previous. And I remember actually speaking to him. So I was at home at my parents' house, and I came downstairs afterwards, and I must have been on the phone for about an hour and a bit. And my mum was like, "Oh, that was a long phone call. Like, was it good?" And I was like, "Yeah, we literally just spoke about Man United, Rangers, like everything football. Didn't really speak much." And he just said, "Touch base when you get here." So then messaged when I was in New Zealand at the time and said, "Landing in Sydney next week." And he's like, "Great, no worries. Meet me here at this time." So met him, and the rest is history.
Yeah, cool. So sometimes when you have those initial meetings with someone, it's almost just like getting to know each other and developing a bit of a connection, isn't it? And that's part of coaching, really, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think that was definitely. I mean, we spoke about football, we spoke sort of everything around. I guess it was me and Emily at the time, so like what our ideas were, what we wanted to do, where we saw ourselves, and then I actually remember then the meeting ended and he was like, do you two like rugby? And we were like, yeah, sure. So he gave us gold passes. It was Ladies' Day at Sydney University Rugby Club. So we ended up getting gold passes to the rugby club and
nice.
enjoyed a day at the rugby the next day.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then went down the following weekend to watch. They were in like is when they used to have the pre-season cup. So they were in the final of the pre-season cup. So we went down and watched. Heather Garrick was the coach at the time. So watched Heather coach their first team and then sort of went from there and started getting involved in training sessions. And
cool. And it all happened.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And your degree at uni, you call it sports development. What is
sports management?
Sports management.
Yeah, sports management, sport and leisure management.
And is that more around the business side of sport, or is it?
Yeah, sort of. So the administration and business side of, I guess, just the operations of sports. How you manage them, bit of the background of, anything from financial to politics, anything around that sort of background of sport. I knew that I wanted to be in sport full time, and when I was growing up, coaching full time wasn't as probably accessible as it is now. I mean, even now it's still difficult to coach full time in that capacity, but I knew I needed to do something. Originally I was going to do PE teaching, but I just thought that was too narrow with regards to, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a PE teacher. So I just sort of wanted to get a bit more of a business background, and ultimately I guess that's what's kept me in football ever since, really, because I have always had sort of like development officer roles, which have been heavily admin based in the day, but then gets me out of the field and overseeing a lot at night time. So that's what you're currently doing at the moment. You've got a fairly large admin role, and as well as your coaching role. Yeah. So my title is football development officer, but I largely run a lot of the operations at the club, along with John. So me and John are the only two full-time members of staff. So then we run the operations of the club, and then all the sort of, I guess, football side comes into that. Yeah, great. So you're currently working across the youth development space right up until the NPL1. Where do you feel most comfortable, and where do you feel like you can make the most impact as a coach? Yeah, it's a good question. I think starting from the young ones really develop some skills that you don't necessarily get from the older ones, and then vice versa. When you're with the older ones, you can really get into sort of like the tactical side and the player management side that you don't get from a youth space. So I think it's actually important to sort of have some experience of working across all of it. I think definitely starting from the younger age groups really defines you, and ultimately if you can manage a group of 8-year-olds, you can manage a group of any players in terms of being clear, concise with your instructions and your delivery of a session. So I think practice, design, communication all comes from the younger, and as you sort of expand on your own football knowledge and you get more comfortable, I think then the senior space becomes a lot easier with what you've learned at the younger ages. In terms of where I see myself most comfortable, like I think youth development for me has always been an area that I'm really passionate about, and I think it's really under-resourced and undervalued. There's not many sort of head coaching roles at that level of that pinnacle of the game, but ultimately that's where you develop the best players, really. If you miss out those key foundation phase years, then you've missed a beat. So I really enjoy that space, and I do really like assisting in the senior space, just from a point of view of being able to help individual players a little bit more and just getting them more tactical information out that you might not necessarily get from individual players at the youth development space. Yeah, fair enough. And in terms of, I guess, your role in the youth program, what do you do day to day in terms of the type of training that you might take on with, I guess, the younger players as opposed to some of the older players? Do you find the training methodology changes, or is it roughly similar the way you coach through different age groups? I think so. Our girls' youth league's under 14 to under 18, and now sort of under 14s, under 15s, and under 16 to some degree. They're obviously, as much as they're playing in a league that's got a table, their results don't necessarily matter. Yeah, they're playing for finals football, but I think that at them 3 age groups especially, it's really about player development. So trying to make sure we get the best out of individuals in a team environment. It's obviously the same with the under 18s, but the difference is they count towards club championships. So they have got a little bit more pressure of the winning, or the performance of the results do matter. They count. So that's then sort of like a bit of a balance of you're still developing and you're still trying to get that individual development of each player, but you are sort of also, I guess it's still an element of learning, but you're trying to get them ready for senior football, where it does become a little bit more performance based. And even in terms of like game time, whereas the younger groups are definitely equal game time. In the 18s, you can start trying to introduce a little bit more about the reality of what's to come when they're into senior football to make sure they're prepared for it. Yeah. So you reckon about that 18-year-old age group is about the time where you can start to shift away from equal time to really focusing on, I guess, to an extent, focusing on performance-based, and players understanding that their role in the team might come down to, I guess, their overall abilities and
performance.
I think so, yeah. I think it's important to remember that it is still development and that it's still key ages of learning. So not taken away from that. It's about a balance. But yeah, also you are trying to prepare them for senior football. So it's important that they still get those other learnings of what's to come in the senior football space and how that's different from youth development space.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you're quite passionate about that youth development space. But unfortunately, I think a lot of coaches' long-term goals are to go to as high as they can, go to senior football, professional football, and become professional coaches. What do you think we can do to try and promote the idea of having a lot of good coaches at that development level? Because, ideally where we need more good coaches.
I think it comes down to investment. So you need to make sure that, these roles are available. Like, I don't know how many, I guess, head of youth development or head of academy roles, or even, come down to NPL space. You can have like a girls youth league technical director, which is what I do, but there's no sort of job description around that or support around that to what that actually entails, or who's holding me accountable outside of my club. There's nothing else that sort of holds a credibility for that. So I think it's investment in to make sure that role is really well sought. They get the support and education they need to make sure that you can only better players as much as we're as good as coaches. So I think that's really important, investing in it. And then even like the little things, like I know there's a lot of clubs out there that even NPL level like don't even have assistants. So I think it's really important that you're, as a head coach of a youth team, if you're then trying to focus on a team, but also individuals within that, having an assistant's really helpful to get that balance right. So I think investment in just the staffing in those areas and making sure they're well supported with coach education is really important.
And in terms of your long-term goals as a coach, where do you sort of see yourself in 5 or 6 years?
I've never had a goal in the sense. I think football for me has always been one, I'm fortunate to be involved in football. I'm grateful just to be in football in a full-time capacity. Like no day feels like work. But also it's taken me on an amazing journey. Like when I think about, starting in England, then going to America, to then coming here, I just feel like in football, it's one of the things that if you're passionate about what you do and you work hard and, and you invest in yourself, then opportunities arise. And I think I quite like it's taken me around the world really. So I'm always open to new opportunities. I'm open to growing and expanding, but also I love where I am, what I do, and sort of take it day by day just to continue to be better and help where I can. So in terms of a long-term goal, I'm not too sure. I definitely want to try and push myself as much as I can, like I said, in the youth development space, and also then as an assistant, maybe at a higher level, just to get that senior. I don't necessarily see myself as a head coach for a first team at a senior level, but definitely involved in just adding value where I can, sort of more from behind the scenes, I guess.
Yeah, great. So you coached across 3 continents at a variety of levels, the UK, USA and Australia. Have you noticed any differences between the different countries in terms of the way they go around their coaching and the development?
Yeah, I think firstly it's more about the actual environment in each place is very different. Yeah. Obviously in England, football was sort of like our only sport really. So I think that the knowledge around it and the support around it and just the involvement of it's been going on a lot longer than other countries. So they're maybe a little bit more advanced in certain areas. America was very different in the sense of like the investment of it was really high. They placed a lot of value on sort of like the physical side of the game, the technical side of the game. And for me, it was soccer in America. It was very different, but like, again, still really loved it and valued it. And I did some of my licenses there, that sort of lower licenses. Found it strange. They had 2 coaching pathways with 2 different governing bodies, which is a bit strange.
Really?
Yeah.
What was it?
So they had like USSF and then they had like NCAA. So they've got 2 coaching licenses running side by side. Whether that's changed now, this is a few years back. And then here, I find here was a good balance. And I think what I did like about America when I was there compared to England was how prevalent the women's game was. Like they loved the women's national team. They're obviously super successful. So in that sense, it was really nice to be in a country where women's football was probably more valued than the men's team. Whereas coming from England, that was, women's football was the complete opposite. I know now recently it's changed probably because of the women's Euros winning that, but I loved that about America. And then coming here, I found it was a really good balance between the two. It's still so new here. So I think there's so much opportunity to grow. There's a lot of potential. So that I find that really exciting. Obviously now with the World Cup being here, it's a great opportunity to keep growing and pushing on. I think one of the biggest differences in terms of coaching space is just the level of support and the investment again. So I know that when I was home for those 2 years that I mentioned earlier, when I had some visa issues and I went home and I was working at Norwich and Watford, I started my UEFA B, and just the support I got around that, where I had like a mentor, they'd come out and do in situ visits sort of once every few months at my club that I was at. So they came to see you in your own environment. And it wasn't just doing your license, you got a whole network of support around that. And then the same as they were doing like an initiative at the time to drive, I guess, female coaches, knowing that the female game was about to blow up. They wanted to make sure that the female coaches were growing with that. So they put loads of initiatives in place sort of a few years prior to that to ensure that those coaches in the game stay in the game. So we had loads of workshops, we had loads of meetings, we were all in group chats. It was so collaborative. Whereas here, I think it's so isolated. You're just sort of with your club, you do your licenses. There's not too much outside of your licenses. And then really you just learn from your own silos of within your club. So I think it's again, just investment of resources of what's available and having that, I guess, extra support outside of just your coaching licenses. What other coach education is there? And it is slowly getting better, like especially with the World Cup being on. They've done the legacy. I know, especially from a female space, they've had the legacy program, which has been great. They've actually, so I'm doing my B license here at the minute, and I have got a mentor. So that's been a really, really good noticeable change. So I think they're getting there, but there's a long way to go in that space. Yeah,
great. And what are some of the, I guess, if you could choose one or two things that you picked up from the UK or the USA that you could try and implement in Australia, what might they be?
Definitely collaboration. So I think coaches working together, same as what we say about players, the more you can sort of like pose problems, solutions, and work together as a team to come to that is how you do creative thinking and decision making. But as coaches, sometimes we just do that on our own without collaborating with other coaches, because I guess sometimes we get so focused on results based or winning, whatever it might be. But I think collaboration for me is key.
And I think that's across a number of sports in Australia in terms of coaches not willing to share ideas with other coaches. It tends to keep everybody's IP within themselves, and it doesn't grow the game or grow, I guess, the knowledge within the game. So I think it's really important to have that, opportunity to share, I guess, ideas with a lot of other coaches. And it just means that next year, if another coach uses some of your ideas, then you've got to, grow your knowledge and come up with strategies to then counteract those ideas. So it's just going to, again, improve you as a coach, improve the other person as a coach, and then improve the players.
I think as well, as the game grows, like in modern football now, there are no secrets. So like with everything that comes with the game now, with video, data analysis, statistics, the game is that accessible that if you're a tactical coach, you already know almost what the opposition is going to do. So I think having those discussions and then trying to figure out how you can then counter it is really important. That's only going to grow the game as a whole.
In the scheme of things, Australia is fairly new to football or soccer. Traditionally, AFL and the rugby codes have dominated, but over the last 10 to 15 years, football's grown massively here. Where do you see football heading in Australia? And do you see us becoming world champions at any stage?
In the female game, I think it's possible. Like I think, you look at now how many of the players are playing overseas and playing at that really, really high level. And hopefully now they've got an opportunity to sort of grow their domestic leagues, or even if they use it as like a development league, but just still to get sort of like really important match minutes for those younger players at still a very high level is important. Again, I think it's going to come down to investment. Like I said, they've been doing a lot of legacy around the Women's World Cup. So if that's successful and they continue that, then I think, it only puts the game in a steady, good place. I think there's, again, being such a large country that Australia is, just trying to have some alignment with all of the stakes and all of the governing bodies and what everyone's aligned to try and achieve the same goal is also important. But look, it's like I said, it's exciting because it's so new. So I definitely see there's opportunity there and potential there for the game to grow. And who knows, especially as other countries might start halting, then, it gives you an opportunity to catch up. But I guess we'll see with this Women's World Cup. Australia's still in it, and there's a lot of top teams. The USA are out, so
we'll see what happens. But hopefully the Matildas can keep going and go all the way. What about the men's game? Do you see the Socceroos competing with the best teams of Europe and South America in the near future?
Again, I think I'm not worked in the men's game as much as what the women's game here, so my knowledge is probably lesser. But in terms of like, you look at the players even coming through A-League that are then getting contracts overseas, like especially in the Scottish Premier League, a lot of them have gone over there recently. So I think there's, again, for youth, I think it's a really, really good space to grow. It's just a shame that they have to go overseas to then get that next level. It's whether we can then bring that more here rather than releasing these players, or even if we can get them to come back afterwards. I think it's also really important. So as they then get to the back end of their careers, coming back to the clubs they started at. But look, football's forever changing, so I don't think you can never say never. But again, I think it comes down to investment and making sure we're doing all the things we can to try and make the game in the best place as possible.
Yeah, great. So in school education, we promote differentiation. So if some students are struggling with maths concepts, the lesson provides more basic learning activities for those students. And if some are excelling, we provide extension activities. So in one class, we might see 3 or 4 levels of maths being taught. Do you think we use these ideas enough in sports coaching?
No, I think again, it's very easy to get when you're coaching a team, you get so based on your team and what you're playing at the weekend and who you're up against and how that relates to the team. It's sometimes you miss the individual development. So I think that's where it's really important to have like individual development plans in place. I know we have IDPs across all of our youth so that you actually understand players, I guess, strengths and then areas to develop on, but really honing in on their strengths. Because ultimately, I think to take the player to the next level, as much as you can work on the areas of development, you don't want to neglect them. They're not the things that are going to take you up. It's trying to find out what you're good at and what gives you the X factor over somebody else and really trying to take that to your advantage because that's what's going to push you to the next level. So I know that you can base your training around IDPs. You might have IDP sessions where even within your own team or your own age group, you can base it so that the IDP strengths are all together and then areas of development are all together. So you sort of group it that way, or you could even mix the age groups completely and have it so that one day you might be doing 1v1 attacking and the players that strengths there, whether it's an under 14-year-old and under 18-year-old, whoever it might be, they're in the same group and vice versa. So I think you can definitely use the same approach of learning like they do in schools in coaching.
So playing devil's advocate, if you've only got the one coach and you're looking after, say, the under 12s or the under 13s team, how can you manage to, I guess, differentiate part of your training session to meet the needs of 2 to 3 different levels of athletes?
Yep. So I think you can do the same practice, but split them into groups. So let's say to make it like a 1v1 or a 2v2 or maybe a 2v1 practice, whatever you're doing, and just have 3 of them set up. And players won't even know, but you just group them. You set them up and you say, 1, 2, and 3, you're over here. And without even knowing, that them 3 have all got similar strengths or to whatever topic you're working on. And then you come down. So then you're stretching the players that need stretching.
Yeah.
And whilst also providing challenge to the ones that maybe it's their area of development, but they're with other players that are of similar ability in that area.
Yeah. So I guess to do that, you need to have good planning and good organisation beforehand so that when you get to the training session, you're not sort of thinking on the spot, well, what am I doing? And, how am I going to group the players? So I guess you're sort of basically advocating being prepared and planning sessions.
Yeah, and knowing your players.
Yeah.
Knowing your players is crucial.
Yeah, awesome. So you're also a big advocate for games-based learning. Tell me why you think games are so vital for developing players.
Ultimately, I guess you don't. One of the hardest things about football is bringing what you do on the training pitch into the game. And if you're not doing enough of that within game situations or realistic situations, it's going to be hard to then relate it to game day. So I think the more you can train in a game-based approach, the better. And within that, you can always add, constraints that limit a practice to get repetition, but also provide opportunity to get repetition, and really sort of like hone in on a certain area of the game, but in the most game realistic environment possible.
So when we talk about games, when you use games at training, how similar is it to an actual game?
Yeah. So when I say game, I think it's important that it doesn't have to have goals, that's for sure, but it has to be directional. So you've always got an element of defending and attacking, and you've always got one way that you're going and one way you're defending, because again, that's realistic to the game. But how you score might be, it could be a target player at the end you're trying to pass into, it could be an end zone trying to run with the ball into, it could be goals, but either way, directional. So we always say practices should be as directional as possible. They should always have opposition. If you're trying to get success, so let's say it's like a passing practice, but again, still with opposition, just so they've got decision making, try and go no more than a +2. So at least then you've got an overload, but you've still got lots of decision making. You've always got opposition there. So I think, directional opposition, and then making sure there's outcomes. So if you're working on attacking, make sure the defending team has still got an outcome so that you keep that intensity high. And then competition, like always make everything competitive.
Okay.
So I think as long as you have those 4, that's sort of helping you keep it as realistic to the game as possible.
And you mentioned constraints. What did you mean by constraints?
Yep. So again, like it might be something, I don't know, we might be working on, let's use pressing, for example, trying to engage an early press. You might just even have the field in halves. So now you've got 2 halves, you can now put constraints in where, depends how you want to do it. It could be like a restricting constraint. So basically it's a rule that's saying that this is the only way you can score. So for example, you can only score from winning the ball in the a defending, well, their opposition defending half, our attacking half. So that's encouraging a high press, and that's the only way you can score. So you've restricted that, or you could do it by reward. So by saying that if you win the ball in the opposition half and then score, it's worth 3. Or you can do it in a relating way. So you can relate it to the game by saying we're 2-0 down, there's 7 minutes left, how are we going to win the game? So now it's encouraging a high press. So there's loads of different ways you can put constraints on a game, just by the design of the practice by having a halfway line, or just by adding in either like restrictive rules or reward rules.
Yeah, okay, great. Hi listeners, a quick halftime note before we continue. If you haven't looked at the Elite Performance Journal's Coach's Notepad or the Athlete Journals yet, make sure you get onto their website, eliteperformancejournal.com, and check them out. The Athlete Journals and Coaching Notepads are designed by elite athletes and coaches and are a great tool to add to your team's arsenal. Listeners to the Coach Doctor podcast have access to a 20% discount on APJ products by using the code word Coach Doctor, which is all one word and all in lowercase, to receive the discount when you're at the checkout. Okay, let's get back to the interview. Okay, so I'm going to throw an example at you here. I've got a squad with 3 players who are struggling with pass selection and pass accuracy. I've got another 3 players who defend really poorly. They struggle to mark their opponents effectively, and they are slow to react to potential intercept situations. Can I promote learning via games for these players, or do I need to go back to the basics and revert to drills to explicitly focus on these skills?
No, definitely. Like I said before, as long as a game's got direction, opposition, that can be, it doesn't need to be an 11v11 format or a 9v9 format. You can break that right down to 1v1, 2v2 and make it so isolated. So you might start that with a 1v1, just going end to end, especially for the defenders that are struggling just within 1v1 principles. And then you build it slowly up to that to then incorporate 2v2. Then you can get the pass in for the in possession team. And also then focusing on the second defender and whether they cover their first one or whether they follow the track and run of any supporting players. So I think you just build it from starting with a smaller, but ultimately the 11v11 game is minimized down to 1v1 situations all over the pitch. So I think you can always go still games based. 1v1 is still very, very game based. If you take a section of the pitch, that's exactly what it is. So I think absolutely you can still do that in a game situation.
Okay. When you mentioned the constraints based coaching before, if coaches are struggling with some of those ideas, are there any resources or websites or anything like that that can help them come up with ideas for drills or for games and stuff like that?
Yeah, there's loads. I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I think podcasts are a great way of learning and sort of honing in what other clubs do. There's a lot of good, really, really good books out there, especially for constraints-based learning. And then the same for, I use Twitter a lot. Like Twitter's got a lot of good resources for, coaching, exercising, or just ideologies. So yeah, there's plenty out there.
Yeah, okay. So as the club development officer, do you also focus on coach development, or does your role generally just require focusing on athlete development?
We've always been an area we really, really want to try and expand. I think coach education, again, because like I said before, you can get so sort of just caught up in your own team and what you do. It's difficult because obviously everyone still has full-time jobs. So this is almost like a bit of a hobby for them on the side, trying to find time to get everyone together. But in my role as Girls Youth League Technical Director, we've tried to get everyone together at least before the start of the season. We did a bit of a coach education, more so on, I guess, who we are, sort of our club's values and philosophies, how we play, how we can support each other. And then sort of the mid-season one, we all got together and went through a bit more of like situations that they found arose throughout the season. Again, how we can support each other. And it's a lot of that collaboration I said before, it's really important. We try and create an environment where all of our coaches can get together. Same as on Sunday, on game day, everyone tries to stay for as much of the day as possible just to, I guess, bounce ideas off each other or see if somebody else has seen something different about their game. Because again, that's how you learn, by just talking and communicating. So we try and have an approach as much as possible, being open, honest. And then I try and catch up with coaches as much as I can. I'm just giving them feedback or watching their sessions, watching their games, giving my input, but then also if they ever need any sort of support or advice, trying to be open with that. Yeah.
Do you try to encourage a certain coaching style? So I guess, do you try to encourage more games-based learning, or do you just basically leave it up to the coach to decide how they're going to run their sessions?
I think it's a balance. Again, you don't. The best part of coaching is inputting your own views into it. So you don't want to take that away. But we definitely have a club philosophy, and we definitely have values and that's why it's important to go through that at the beginning, that all of our coaches are aligned with. But in terms of like sort of freedom to, especially with formations, we like to have flexibility. So all of that coaches have complete freedom of. But I think as long as we're looking to play a certain way and how we coach is important. so making sure we have really, really positive demeanour, but also we're stretching players at the same time.
And in terms of communication, how do you approach coaches if you're trying to give feedback? Often, obviously, there's going to be some scenarios where you're going to try and encourage further development or try and encourage improvement. How do you go about doing that?
I think it's exactly the same as you go about doing it with players. So you're obviously, one, I think you build that relationship with them of trust and, like I said, being open and honest and approachable, and that they're interested at the best of your heart. So I think that once they know that, they know that all you're doing is trying to support each other. And then it's about how you would speak to players, I guess, if you're trying to give them some sort of feedback on, certain things they're doing really well, and then things that you think that they can edit or slightly adjust to get points across differently. And I don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong way of doing things. Again, I think it's very sort of like collaborational and communicative to make sure that you're trying to get the best out of not just them, but also you. So I think it's just like a two-way thing of getting the best out of each other to get to the same goals. Yeah,
cool. And you mentioned books, podcasts, and Twitter, and different social media sites and stuff. Have you got any examples of people that you might follow, or websites or books that you have really enjoyed that coaches could use or follow to get more information?
Yep. Podcasts, I really enjoy the Modern Soccer Coaching one.
Yeah.
They sort of do a lot of really interesting episodes on there. I also just generally listen to, like, in terms of podcasts, just ones that just are general about football. So just keeping you up to date with news, not necessarily anything specific about coaching, but I think just to stay involved and in line with what's going on. In terms of books, there's a really interesting one from Tim Lees, a guy called Tim Lees, who's worked a number of academies back home, like Southampton and Watford, but he's got a really good in possession book. It's all about sort of like receiving lines and breaking the game down to certain elements that I just found really thought provoking. And then there's a really good constraints led approach book by Ben Bartlett, which is a great one to read. So yeah, there's plenty out there. And on Twitter, I just sort of try and follow as many, I guess, coaching sites as possible, or articles.
Yeah, cool. And you mentioned earlier on having a mentor. How important are mentors for you? What do you get from having a mentor?
Again, it's like that level of support that you don't necessarily get, and bouncing ideas off people, and also just trying to, I guess, can make sure that you stay motivated in that space, and keep trying to look to grow and stretch yourself. Sometimes you can sort of become your way is the right way, and you get isolated in that thinking sometimes, especially when you've been doing it for a long time. So I think, constantly refreshing ideas and hearing other people's opinions and getting support from them is key. Yeah.
And you mentioned to me that you went up to one of the England training sessions because one of your mentors is part of the England squad. Is that right?
Yeah. So that was my UEFA B mentor while I was at home. He was the guy that was sort of like running the initiative at the time to make sure the women's coaches were growing with the game. So he's now got a role as the senior women's coach development lead in England. So he oversees all the coaches in WSL and the women's championship. But he was here for the World Cup, so that was great catching up with him. So we went to watch England training, and that was a great opportunity.
And what was some of the, I guess, takeaways from that training session with England?
It's funny because I think they do a generic one when they sort of like have it was an open training session. So I was sort of in the background of an open training session. So it's a very generic one, but just interesting, just talking to other key members of staff and learning takeaways, and just even like spending time with Mark in general, having kept that connection and relation. I think that's also so important. Like you keep those networks in football, and just seeing what they're doing at home in this female space, especially off the back of winning the women's Euros, how they're trying to maintain that success off the back of winning, the impact of what that's had on the women's game. So just interesting to hear those little nuggets of information that you seem so far away from home sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Just in terms of, you talked about being in the UK, where England's obviously the most dominant sport, and it's the most televised and most publicised in the media. Coming out here, you've obviously got AFL, you've got rugby league and rugby union to an extent, netball, quite a lot of sports that are quite big out here. So there is a lot of competition. Do you ever look at some of the other sports to try and learn things from them? I mean, AFL, even though it's quite a different game, it's still a 360-degree game. So there'd probably be quite a few things you could, I guess, learn and maybe apply to football from other sports. Is there anything that sort of...
Oh, no, I think definitely in terms of I love listening to other coaches in that space. I think coaching's coaching. It's all about people. And I think as long as you get people and principles, it's very transferable across sport. So, you take away the tactics and the technical elements, how the actual philosophies and ideas of coaching and people is the same. So I know, like, I've read the All Blacks book. What's it called?
Legacy.
Yeah. And again, like, the philosophies and ideas in there are incredible. And again, some really thought-provoking things. So I think you can definitely take away anything from other sports. So yeah, it's good. But I think the issue then comes to trying to get players to sort of like really hone in and trying to master one sport when they're playing a multitude of sports. And I think it's funny because people always say, you know, in Australia you're competing with loads of other codes, but I feel like in England, especially the female game, we're almost competing with ourselves, because the women's is trying to compete with the English Premier League, which a lot of other countries' men's competitions can't compete with. So we have no chance of trying to get our women's to compete in that space. And again, it's silly where the game times are all the same. So a lot of our women's teams play the same time as a men's Premier League. So again, trying to attract audiences when you've got men's Premier League on your doorstep is really difficult. Yeah.
Talking about, I guess, supporting, we just had a conversation before we started where I asked you about the round of 16 game, the Matildas versus Denmark. Give me your thoughts on how Australians support the game, and I guess how it sort of is quite different to the English atmosphere.
Yeah, I think first of all, it's amazing that they're getting these crowds at the World Cup. Like the attendances are incredible. So there's obviously interest there. I just think the interest is in a bit of a different light, whereas the interest is sort of like being a part of the event, you know, wearing the green and gold, trying to see your idols and your role models in Sam Kerr. So I just find the atmosphere is very around that. So it's very family friendly. Like, you know, I look back at the Matildas game, I think most of the crowd, the things that were getting the most excited about was the Mexican wave coming around and Sam Kerr warming up. So again, it's like the interest is there, but now how do we try and direct that interest more to actually what's going on the pitch in front of them, and actually the understanding and the passion for the game. Whereas I think that's the slight difference in England. There's a lot more actual investment of the 11 players that are on the pitch, what's happening, passages of play, and they're the things that are sort of like cheered and ignited. In games like that game where the Matildas played Denmark, you've got probably people like me, bandwagon supporters that jump on, don't really have that much knowledge about football. So we're sort of just invested in the atmosphere itself. But then, there's probably a smaller proportion of people like yourself that really focus on the technical and the tactical aspects of the game. So it's interesting how you said that, because it's probably quite true. I think it's also, you get that at club level, because at club you've got your more supporters. So I do think on a national stage it's different, because you've got a lot more that are just proud to be, you know, Australian, proud to be English, whatever the nation is that they're then supporting. So I do think the environment in general of national football compared to domestic football is different, because you don't have the sort of, I guess it's more of a passion and a pride of being a part of something as opposed to actually the football. So I guess that in itself will bring a different crowd, but I just think there's more people, I guess, invested in the game to a different level. So on the Women's World Cup, we're at the time of recording, we're at the quarterfinal stages, just about going to the quarterfinals. Who do you tip to win the comp? Part of me is thinking Japan. I just think they've been the most steady team in it, sort of have some really, really good performances, been really clinical in front of goal. I also think Spain could go well. I also think Australia could go well. I just think their side of the group, you know, my heart and head say in England, but I don't think we've had many convincing performances. So I think we'll go at some stage. So maybe I'm going to go Japan if I have to answer. Because England were obviously very good in the Euros, but do you think maybe they're just going along steady and they're going to step up at some stage? And look, I think again, tournament football is different, where no one remembers the performances. It's just about the results. And at the minute, they're getting the results. There've been a lot of 1-0s or, you know, winning on penalties. And I think that is also important. They had a lot of changes from that Women's Euros team with injuries. And so, I think it's a good challenge for them and a good test to see where they're at. And I know Lucy Bronze said that before the tournament, if we can just keep winning 1-0, we're happy. Like that's what tournament football is about. It doesn't necessarily matter about performance. So, but I do kind of hope they switch it on at some point to make it not so nerve-wracking. Okay, great. Obviously, we've just been part of the Business Development of Women's Football Conference here at Sydney University, and you played a big role in that. So one of the things I noticed during that, you're really focused, you're spending a lot of time on your computer doing, some of your work around your football and stuff like that. On a weekly basis, what's a week look like to you in terms of you playing on the weekends on Sunday? Do you have games on Saturday as well? No, well, boys, but no, the girls are just Sundays. Do you get involved in the boys? From an operational, but not necessarily from an on-field coaching.
So you're working Saturdays and Sundays?
No. I don't have to be there on a Saturday. Yeah.
Okay.
So Sundays I'm there all day, game day. Yeah.
Okay. And then what's the rest of your week look like? Do you have any days off during the week to make up for Sunday or?
No, not really. Like I said, sports 24/7, right? So I guess even from an operational point of view, even on Saturdays, as much as I'm not there, if something goes wrong, I'm the person. If referees haven't shown up, they'll call me.
Yeah.
So I'm always sort of like hands on deck to some degree. In terms of my week, I said a lot of it's, operational, admin based, trying to make sure that the club's running effectively and efficiently in office, but then also trying to do as much as I can to fulfill, I guess, my roles on field, especially in the girls and women's space of girls youth league technical director, and then assisting Emily in the first team space. But I guess how we break down our actual training, so they train 3 times a week, all the teams. So normally depending on what day it is or what age groups training that day, but obviously you've got like most of them are like match day +1 or +2, and that one's a bit of a lighter session, so they might focus a bit more on some sort of like technical but a bit slower speed, or it might be something like slightly tactical from the weekend that they just wanted to fix. But that's definitely like our lower intensity one. Then the midweek session's always our conditioning one, but we always do our conditioning through football, so whether it's through small-sided, medium-sided, or large-sided games. But that's definitely our higher intensity. We try and get high speed meters in that session, and then as you then tailor up towards the back of the week and come into sort of like match day -1, match day -2, you're then sort of focusing on, I guess, what you need for the weekend. So that one then becomes a little bit more tactical. We always try and get some form of 11v11 in there, and a lot of stop-start coaching to try and get out any ideas or whatever it is they're working on.
So you're obviously doing big weeks in season. How about off season? Do you have much time off, or are you just doing a lot more?
Off season probably becomes busier from an operations admin side, because you've obviously got, you're trying to figure out recruitment for the following year. So you're holding all your trials. You've got obviously coach recruitment, trying to make sure coaches are up to speed with everything. So, you've got kit, everything that comes in with getting a season off the ground. So that, and especially as the seasons are now extending, that sort of period seems to be getting shorter and shorter. So the off season is pretty manic actually from an off field perspective. And then also trying to set everything up for the following year. So, trying to do your plan or your pre-season planning, tweaking any of your sort of game models or styles of play, whatever it is you want to do to make sure you're well prepared as the season starts. Yeah.
So in recent times, a lot has been said and done about athlete wellbeing. How about coach wellbeing? Obviously, you do have a pretty busy life. What do you do to wind down? How do you relax? And, for coaches that are out there, I mean, myself, I used to do a hell of a lot of coaching, and, sometimes you sort of feel like you didn't have a life away from coaching. And what do you do for yourself to wind down?
It's a good question. I think it's, for years, I probably didn't have the balance right. And I think it's really only more recently that I've started to, I think actually since COVID, I think that's where COVID for me was actually a good thing. I think it made everyone sort of slow down and realize there's a lot of things that you can be doing outside of your day-to-day life that adds a lot of value. So for me, it's about like taking those moments and times when I can in the morning or evenings between sessions where, whether it's, going out for a walk, going for a run, listening to music, whatever it might be, and just make sure I get plenty of outdoors time. But also trying to spend as much time I can with like friends, family. So try and do the things that you love outside of it, and getting a really, really good balance. And switching off is important, like being able to just completely switch off from what you're doing to, I guess, keep you refreshed.
It's very easy to be consumed in your sport and your career, especially if it's something you love. Speaking from my own experiences, I tend to, in my spare time, go and read coaching books or sports-related books, or listen to, coaching podcasts and those sorts of things. So, sometimes you do have to find that time to sort of say, even though I'm interested, got to sort of switch off and do something else that's sort of completely different to sort of recharge your batteries.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think COVID helped me with that. So it was almost like a forced way of learning those.
Yeah. Well, awesome. And how long left in the season? How many games you got left?
5.
5. And then semis and finals and stuff like that?
Yeah. 5 games, semi-finals. Obviously still got the World Cup to go. So a busy few months ahead. And then we're a bit different, that we have Unisport Nationals as well. So that's all in the end of the months. That's the end of September. And then we also qualified for the University World Cup. So we're off to China in November for that as well. So
that'll be good. That'll be fun.
Yeah. So lots to look forward to.
Awesome. Well, Amy, best of luck with everything that's going on for the future. And I hope England get through their quarterfinal, and hopefully the Matildas get through their quarterfinal, and
then we face each other.
So hopefully England get knocked out at that stage. And
that's right. It's a win-win for me regardless then,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast, and Really appreciate hearing some of your insights and thoughts and ideas around coaching today.
Cool, thanks, James.
Some of the key discussion points for me in this conversation were firstly around individual development plans. As coaches, we often tend to think about developing the whole team first and spend less time on individual player development. In our coaching, we need to make sure we also look at developing the individual as well, especially in the youth development stages, which are critical for developing a set of foundational skills. Amy's interest in youth development is also very refreshing, when so many coaches want to bypass youth coaching and go straight into the elite levels. Unfortunately, sometimes youth development roles aren't seen to be as appealing as elite coaching roles, but often they require more detailed coaching and a stronger coach who is invested in the development process. The problem is most of these roles are voluntary and it's hard to attract coaches into these roles. Finally, Amy spoke about having a work-life balance. I know that Amy's really invested in her role, and in some cases, she's working 6 or 7 days a week. She mentioned that during COVID, she had a chance to breathe and take a break, and learn to make sure she finds time for herself. I think as coaches, we can be very invested in our sports and our athletes, and live and breathe it. But to avoid burnout, we need to ensure we do have downtime, to ensure we keep enjoying what we do, and it doesn't become a chore. It is important we can read the signs for ourselves and know when we need to take a break. Remember, a rested and refreshed coach is often better than an overworked and burnt out coach. So look out for number one, as well as all the players under you. I hope you've learned something from the conversations with Amy today. Her leadership and experience at the Sydney University Soccer Football Club is highly valued, with the club claiming 4 straight premierships in the senior Women's NPL1 competition between 2018 and 2022, and their youth program being one of the best football programs in Australia, feeding into that senior program. They've also qualified for the finals in every youth team in 2023, which speaks volumes for their youth development program. The club has also developed several players and coaches that have gone on to represent A-League clubs. And more recently, 2 of our current Matildas, Claire Hunt and Claire Wheeler, who both joined the club in 2017. Thanks again for listening to this podcast. Please like it and leave a review if you have time. Pass it on to your friends and colleagues in the coaching industry if you can. And as usual, keep learning.